The stars looked peaceful from the command deck of the Earth defense ship Valiant. But Commander Jake Morrison knew better. Beyond the moon's orbit, hundreds of alien warships waited in formation. Each vessel was twice the size of humanity's largest ships, and they all belonged to the Vraxian Empire. They had come to make Earth surrender. Jake stood with his hands behind his back, watching the enemy fleet on the main screen. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass. He was 42 years old, with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too much war. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, checking weapons and shields one last time. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan sat at the communications station. She was young, only 26, with red hair tied back in a tight bun. Her fingers moved across the controls as another message came through from the alien fleet. "Sir, the Vraxians are sending another transmission," Kate said. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the tension underneath. "They want an answer about the surrender terms." Jake turned to face her. "What are they offering this time?" Kate read from her screen. "They say if we give up all our weapons and accept their control, they will let Earth's people live. We would become workers for their empire. They promise no one will be killed if we cooperate." The bridge crew fell silent. Everyone knew what those words really meant. Slavery. The Vraxians would take over Earth, strip away humanity's freedom, and use humans as servants across their empire. It was what they had done to 15 other species before. "Send them our answer," Jake said quietly. "Tell them no." Kate's hands paused over the controls. "Sir, they have 10 times more ships than we do. If we fight, most of us will die." Jake looked around at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. These men and women had volunteered to defend Earth, knowing they might not survive. They came from cities and farms across the planet. Some had families waiting for them. Others had lost everyone they loved in the alien attacks that came before this final showdown. "I know the odds," Jake said, "but humanity doesn't bow to anyone. We never have. We won't start now." He walked to the center of the bridge and activated the ship-wide communication system. His voice would now reach every person on the Valiant and every other Earth ship in the fleet. "This is Commander Morrison. In a few minutes, we're going into battle against an enemy that thinks we're weak. They think because they have bigger ships and better weapons, we'll just give up. They don't understand what it means to be human." Jake paused, gathering his thoughts. "We come from Earth. Our world tried to kill us for millions of years. Diseases, predators, storms, earthquakes. Everything on our planet was dangerous, but we survived. We learned to fight back. We learned that sometimes survival means doing things that seem impossible." On other ships across the human fleet, crews listened to Jake's words. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the destroyer Providence, her hand resting on the back of her command chair. She had sent her husband and 2 children to the underground shelters on Earth. She would never see them again, but at least they would be safe while the fleet bought them time. Lisa looked at her tactical officer. "How many evacuation ships got away?" 312, Captain. They're heading for the outer colonies. If we can hold the Vraxians here for 2 more hours, the civilians will be beyond their reach." Lisa nodded. 2 hours. Her ship and crew had to survive for 2 hours against impossible odds. She could do that. She would do that. Back on the Valiant, Jake continued his speech. "The Galactic Council thinks we should accept our place. They say humans are too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous. Maybe they're right. Maybe we are dangerous. But that's because we refuse to be victims. Every human who ever lived had to fight for survival. It's in our blood. It's who we are." Deep underground on Earth, Admiral Peter Grant watched the fleet prepare for battle from the command center buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. Dozens of screens showed him everything happening in space above. He saw the human ships moving into position. He saw the Vraxian armada waiting like a metal wall between Earth and freedom. Peter was 60 years old, a career military officer who had fought in every major conflict of the past 30 years. He had 3 grandchildren in the Denver shelters. He had promised them he would keep Earth safe. Now he had to watch good people die to keep that promise. "Sir, all ships report ready," said Commander Nicole Price, his second in command. She was 38, brilliant, and one of the best tactical minds in Earth's fleet. "They're waiting for your order." Peter took a deep breath. He had prepared for this moment for months, ever since the Vraxians first demanded Earth's surrender. He had known it would come down to this. One desperate battle, one last stand. "Tell them to execute Operation Last Stand," Peter said, "and may God forgive us for what we're about to do." In space, Jake received the order. He looked at Kate. "Send the signal to all ships. It's time." Kate's fingers moved across her controls, and across the fleet red alert klaxons began to sound. Crews rushed to their battle stations. Weapons came online. Shields powered up to maximum strength. The Vraxians saw the human ships begin to move and prepared to fire. Their admiral, Thexlon, stood on his flagship and watched the primitive human vessels with contempt. This would be over quickly. The humans would die, and Earth would belong to the Empire. But Admiral Thexlon had never fought humans before. He didn't understand what made them different from every other species in the galaxy. He didn't know that humans came from a world so dangerous that every other intelligent race called it a death world, a place where nothing should be able to survive, let alone thrive. Jake gave the order that would define the battle. All ships, maximum speed. Direct course to the enemy fleet. Prepare for ramming maneuvers. The human ships surged forward, their engines burning at full power. The Vraxians opened fire, expecting the humans to dodge or retreat. Instead, the human ships flew straight into the weapons fire, taking terrible damage but never slowing down. On the Providence, alarms screamed as enemy fire tore through the shields. Lisa held onto her chair as the ship shook violently. "Damage report," she called out. "Hull breaches on multiple decks. Shield generators failing. But engines are still good, Captain." Lisa smiled grimly. The engines were all that mattered now. "Keep us on course. Don't slow down." The first human ship to reach the Vraxian line was a destroyer called the Courage. Its captain, Greg Martinez, aimed his dying vessel at a Vraxian carrier and pushed his engines beyond their safety limits. The Courage smashed into the carrier at full speed, and both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up space like a second sun. The Vraxians finally understood. These humans weren't trying to win a normal battle. They were willing to die to hurt their enemy. Every human ship that died would take at least one Vraxian ship with it. Admiral Thexlon watched in horror as his fleet began to die. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface. For 3 seconds, a new sun burned in space above the moon. The dominant will, the pride of the Vraxian fleet, simply ceased to exist. The Valiant disappeared in the same instant. 4 other Vraxian capital ships caught in the blast were torn apart. Dozens more were damaged by the shockwave that spread out through space. In Earth's command center, Peter Grant watched the tactical display as the Valiant's signal vanished. He had known Jake Morrison for 20 years. They had served together, fought together, saved each other's lives more than once. Now Jake was gone, along with 300 good people who had trusted him to lead them. Peter's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his face calm. He couldn't afford to show emotion, not yet. His people needed him to be strong. "Status of the Vraxian fleet?" Peter asked. Nicole worked her console, her own face pale with shock. "They're retreating, sir. The blast destroyed their command structure. The remaining ships are pulling back to regroup. They're in complete disarray. Then we don't let them recover. Deploy all remaining forces. Hit them while they're running." The order went out across the solar system. Every human ship that could still fly, every weapon that could still fire, every person who could still fight. They all moved forward to press the advantage. This was humanity's chance. If they let the Vraxians regroup, the alien fleet would eventually restore order and attack again. But if they kept the pressure on now, while the enemy was confused and frightened, they might break the invasion completely. Captain Susan Mitchell commanded a damaged frigate called the Defiant. Half her crew was dead, her shields were gone, and her main weapons were destroyed. But her engines still worked, and she had one working missile launcher. That was enough. "All hands, this is the captain," Susan announced over the ship's communication system. "I know you're tired. I know you're scared. I know we've lost friends today. But the enemy is running, and we're going to chase them. We're going to make them pay for every human life they've taken." Her crew responded with a cheer that sounded more like a battle cry. They were exhausted, injured, pushed beyond all reasonable limits. But they were human, and humans didn't know how to quit. The Defiant joined dozens of other damaged ships pursuing the retreating Vraxians. They fired missiles, shot their guns, even rammed smaller enemy vessels when they ran out of ammunition. It wasn't elegant warfare. It wasn't even smart warfare. It was desperate, vicious, and brutal, and it was working. Meanwhile, on the far side of the moon, another battle was ending. The Vraxians had landed ground troops on Lunar Base Armstrong, trying to capture Earth's main military installation outside the planet. Colonel Steve Harper and his Marines had been fighting them room by room, corridor by corridor for 6 hours. Steve was 51 years old, a veteran of 3 wars, and he was down to 40 Marines out of the 200 who had started the defense. The Vraxians had over 1,000 soldiers still advancing through the base. There was no way to win this fight, but Steve hadn't spent 6 hours fighting just to surrender now. Set the reactor to overload, Steve ordered his chief engineer, Lieutenant Amy Brooks. Maximum yield. Amy looked up from her console. Her face was covered in dust and blood from a wound on her forehead. Sir, if we do that, the explosion will destroy the entire base. We won't be able to evacuate. I know exactly what it'll do, Steve said calmly. We're not giving these aliens anything they can use. If they want this base, they can have rubble. Amy nodded slowly and began entering the commands. Around them, the remaining Marines prepared for the final defense. They set up barricades at the command center entrance. They checked their weapons one last time. They said goodbye to each other in quiet voices. Steve walked among his people, shaking hands, offering words of encouragement. These men and women had volunteered to defend humanity's first real home beyond Earth. They had known it might be a one-way mission. Now that mission was coming to its end. 10 minutes until the Vraxians breached the command center, his tactical officer reported. And the reactor? Steve asked. 12 minutes until overload. We're cutting it close, sir, Steve smiled. Story of my life. Always cutting it close. The next 10 minutes felt like hours. The Marines held the barricades, fighting with everything they had. The Vraxians advanced slowly, carefully, losing soldiers with every step. They knew they were winning, but they didn't understand what they were walking into. Finally, the Vraxian commander broke through the last barricade. He was a tall alien in powered armor, carrying a weapon that could punch through steel. He looked around the command center, seeing the humans waiting for him with their weapons raised. Surrender, the Vraxian commander ordered in broken English. You fight brave, but you lose. Put down guns. We make you prisoners. Steve Harper stood in the center of the room holding a small device in his hand, a detonator. He smiled at the Vraxian commander. We don't surrender, Steve said. We're humans. We do things differently. He pressed the button. The explosion consumed Lunar Base Armstrong and everything within 5 kilometers. 2,000 Vraxian soldiers died instantly. The blast damaged several Vraxian ships in orbit, forcing them to retreat. And Colonel Steve Harper and his 40 Marines died knowing they had taken many enemies with them. Back in Earth's command center, Peter watched as the signal from the lunar base disappeared. Another sacrifice. Another group of heroes who would never come home. How many more would die before this was over? Sir, we're getting reports from across the fleet, Nicole said. The Vraxian forces are in full retreat. They're pulling back beyond Mars orbit. We hurt them badly. Really badly. Peter studied the tactical display. The numbers told a terrible story. Humanity had started the battle with 400 ships. Now they had fewer than 40. 80,000 people dead. 3/4 of Earth's entire space fleet destroyed. Cities on Earth damaged by orbital bombardment. Millions of civilians displaced. But the Vraxians had lost too. Out of their original 500 ships, only 300 remained combat effective. They had lost their flagship and their commanding admiral. Their ground forces on the moon were wiped out. And most importantly, they had lost their confidence. The mighty Vraxian Empire, conquerors of 17 star systems, had been bloodied by a single primitive species from a death world. The shock of that defeat would echo through their entire civilization. What are your orders, sir? Nicole asked quietly. Peter straightened his shoulders and took a deep breath. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. The Vraxians would return eventually, probably with more ships. Earth needed to be ready. Send messages to all colonies, Peter ordered. Tell them what happened here. Tell them to prepare defenses. The Vraxians know about us now, and they won't forgive what we did to their fleet. He paused, thinking about Jake Morrison and Lisa Hayes and Steve Harper and all the others who had died today. They deserve to be remembered. They deserve to have their sacrifice mean something. Start recovery operations for any survivors. Get medical teams up there. And Nicole, I want a complete list of every person who died today. Every single name. We're going to build a memorial, and their names will be carved in stone so humanity never forgets what they did for us. Nicole nodded. her eyes glistening with tears. "Yes, sir. What about the treaty negotiations? The Galactic Council will want to respond to this." Peter's expression hardened. "Let them respond. Let them send diplomats. Let them offer peace. But we negotiate from a position of strength now, not weakness. We proved today that humans can't be conquered easily. We proved that we'll fight to the last ship, the last soldier, the last person if necessary. That's our leverage now." He walked to the window of the command center, looking up at the ceiling as if he could see through 3 miles of rock to the stars above. "Those aliens wanted to enslave us because they thought we were weak. They learned today that humans are dangerous. We come from a death world and we carry that danger with us wherever we go. From now on, every species in the galaxy will know that. Every species will think twice before they threaten Earth." Nicole came to stand beside him. "Do you think they'll leave us alone now?" Peter was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, maybe not. But I know this. We've bought ourselves time. Time to build more ships, train more soldiers, prepare better defenses, and we've sent a message that will spread across the galaxy. Humans don't bow. We never surrender. We fight until we win or until there's nothing left to fight with." Outside the command center, the work of recovery was already beginning. Medical teams prepared to go into space to search for survivors. Engineers examined the damaged orbital stations. Diplomats prepared messages to send to the Galactic Council. Earth's government organized relief efforts for the cities that had been bombed. And in the streets of every city, in the shelters where millions of civilians had waited out the battle, people emerged to look up at the sky. They had seen the flashes of light from the explosions. They had felt the ground shake from the impacts. They knew that thousands of their fellow humans had died to protect them. In Denver, in the shelter where Peter's grandchildren had been hiding, a 7-year-old girl named Emma looked up at the sky and asked her mother a question. "Did Grandpa save us?" Her mother hugged her tight and answered. The diplomatic ship arrived exactly 3 weeks after the vote. It was a beautiful vessel made by the Luminari, all graceful curves and shimmering metal. High Counselor Zephyrim had chosen to land on Earth's surface rather than meeting in orbit. He wanted to see the planet that had produced such fierce warriors. Peter Grant met them not in a comfortable conference room, but in the ruins of Denver. The city had been hit by Vraxian orbital strikes during the battle. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Thousands of civilians had died here. Peter wanted the diplomats to see the cost of their war. Zephyrim stepped off his shuttle and looked around at the devastation. His ancient eyes took in the collapsed buildings, the memorial walls covered with names of the dead, the makeshift shelters where survivors still lived. Beside him walked Counselor Miraseth and 4 other council members representing different species. "Admiral Grant," Zephyrim began. "Just Peter now," Grant interrupted. "I resigned my military commission yesterday. Someone needs to speak for the civilians who died here, and admirals have too much political weight. I'm just a grandfather who wants to make sure his grandchildren grow up free." They walked through the ruins together, past the memorials where people had left flowers and photos of the dead. Peter stopped at one wall where thousands of names were carved into black stone. He ran his hand over the letters. "Jake Morrison," Peter said quietly. "He was my friend. We served together for 20 years. He commanded the ship that destroyed your flagship. 300 people died with him. Good people, young people with families and dreams and futures." He looked at Zephyrim. "All because you decided humans should bow to your authority." Miraseth stepped forward. Her species had large eyes that could show emotions clearly, and Peter saw genuine sadness in them. "We came to prevent more death, Peter. The Council is prepared to offer peace." "At what price?" Peter asked. They moved to a cleared area where tables had been set up for negotiations. Around them, human workers rebuilt the city. Construction robots and manual laborers worked side by side, clearing rubble and laying foundations for new buildings. Everywhere Peter looked, he saw his people refusing to give up, refusing to be victims. Zephyrim opened a datapad and read from it. "The Council offers recognition of human sovereignty over your current territory. We offer trade agreements and protection under galactic law. In exchange, we require limitations on your military expansion. We require monitoring of your weapons development, and we require assurances that you will never share your Deathworlder tactics with other species who might rebel against Council authority." Peter listened patiently, then took out his own datapad and slid it across the table. Our counteroffer. Zephyrim read it, and his expression darkened. You want full council membership? Not provisional status, but full membership with all rights and voting power. We earned it in blood, Peter said simply. We proved we can defend ourselves against council forces. That makes us equals, not subjects. Anything less is an insult. And these reparations you demand? You want the Vraxian Empire to pay for war damages. They attacked us. They destroyed our cities and killed our people. Standard galactic law says the aggressor pays for damages. Or does that law only apply to species who lose their wars? One of the other council members, Ambassador Trell of the merchant species called the Kordax, spoke up. These demands are unreasonable. You're asking us to completely change how the council operates, to give an emerging species the same rights as civilizations that have existed for thousands of years. Peter stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the construction continuing. Human determination made visible. Let me tell you what's unreasonable, Peter said. Unreasonable is attacking a species without provocation. Unreasonable is demanding surrender or death. Unreasonable is assuming that because you have more ships and older civilizations, you have the right to tell others how to live. He turned back to face them. I'll tell you what humanity learned from this war. We learned that you elder races have grown comfortable. You've had power for so long that you forgot what it's like to fight for survival. You make rules that benefit yourselves and expect everyone else to follow them. Well, we don't accept that. We can't accept that. Because if we do, eventually you'll decide we're inconvenient again and we'll be right back where we started. Miraseth raised her hand peacefully. Peter, we understand your anger, but you must understand our position as well. The Council maintains order across thousands of star systems. If we allow one species to defy us without consequences, others will follow. The galaxy could descend into chaos. Or, Peter said, the galaxy could learn that order based on fear and domination isn't real order at all. It's just temporary peace maintained by force. Eventually, someone always rebels against that kind of system. The negotiations continued for hours. The Council representatives consulted with their governments through quantum communication devices. Peter consulted with Earth-selected leaders and the few remaining military commanders. Both sides were trying to find a middle ground, but the gap seemed too wide. On the third day of negotiations, something unexpected happened. Captain Susan Mitchell arrived with Captain Vornith and the other Vraxian defectors. Peter had requested their presence because he wanted the Council to see them, to understand that even the mighty Vraxian military was questioning this war. Vornith stood before the Council representatives and spoke through his translator. Honored counselors, I served the Vraxian Empire for 30 years. I fought in 7 campaigns. I never questioned my orders until I fought humans. When I saw their ships crash into ours, when I saw them detonate their own base rather than surrender, I realized something. These humans believe in their freedom more than they fear death. That is a powerful belief. That is a dangerous belief. But it is also an honorable belief. Ambassador Krell, who was watching the proceedings through a communication link, shouted angrily, You are a traitor. You abandoned your post. No, Vornith said calmly. I abandoned a war that should never have been fought. I abandoned orders that violated everything I thought the Empire stood for. If that makes me a traitor, then I accept that name proudly. The other Vraxian defectors nodded in agreement. There were now 12 of them, all soldiers who had chosen to request asylum rather than continue fighting humans. Zephyrim watched this exchange with thoughtful eyes. Finally, he spoke. Perhaps we have been approaching this incorrectly. Instead of viewing humans as a problem to be solved, perhaps we should view them as a valuable addition to galactic civilization. A species with such dedication to freedom could teach us much. The negotiations took a new direction after that. Instead of demanding restrictions on humanity, the Council began offering partnership. Instead of treating Earth as a conquered territory, they began treating it as a potential ally. It took 2 more weeks, but eventually, a compromise was reached. Humanity would receive full Council membership, but with a transition period of 5 years to fully integrate. Reparations would be paid, but from the Council treasury rather than solely from the Vraxian Empire. This avoided humiliating the Vraxians while still acknowledging Earth's losses. Human military expansion would be unlimited, but humanity agreed to join the Council's mutual defense pacts. If any Council member was attacked, Earth would help defend them. Most importantly, the Council officially recognized Earth as a Category 10 death world. the highest classification. Any future conflict with humanity would require unanimous council approval. The message was clear. Fighting humans was dangerous and should be avoided. Peter signed the treaty in the same ruined plaza where they had first met. He used a pen made from salvaged metal from the Valiant. It seemed right that Jake Morrison's ship would help write humanity's future. This is not the end, Zephyrim warned as they concluded the ceremony. Many species still fear humanity. Some will look for ways to weaken you within the council. Let them try, Peter replied. We've been underestimated before. We've been attacked before. We've survived worse than political maneuvering. As the diplomatic ship departed carrying the signed treaty back to the council, Peter stood with Nicole and watched it go. Around them, Denver continued to rebuild. In orbit, new ships were being constructed. In classrooms across Earth, children were learning about the sacrifices of the Battle of Luna. Do you think it will last? Nicole asked. The peace? Peter was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But we bought ourselves time. Time to build stronger defenses. Time to establish colonies beyond the reach of any fleet. Time to make sure that if war comes again, we're ready. He thought about Jake Morrison and Lisa Hayes and Steve Harper and all the others who had died to buy that time. Their sacrifice had given humanity a future. Now it was up to the living to make sure that future was worth the price paid. Come on, Peter said. We have work to do. Ships to build. Alliances to forge. A place to earn in this galaxy. Nicole smiled. And if someone tries to take that place from us, then we remind them what happened the last time someone underestimated a Deathworlder species. We remind them that humans don't surrender. We never have. We never will. They walked through the ruins together, two survivors planning for a future built on sacrifice and determination. 3 weeks passed after the battle. Earth buried its dead and counted the cost of victory. The news of what happened spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The Galactic Council met an emergency session on their neutral world, and the debate that followed shook their entire civilization. The council chamber was a massive dome built by ancient aliens millions of years ago. Inside, representatives from 200 different species gathered to discuss the human problem. High Counselor Zephyrim called the meeting to order. He was an Eldar, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His people had ruled the stars for 10,000 years, and he had never seen anything like what happened at Earth. We must address the human situation immediately, Zephyrim announced. His voice carried through the chamber using translation technology that made his words understandable to all species. The Vraxian fleet has been badly damaged. Reports indicate the humans fought with unprecedented aggression. We need to decide our response. Ambassador Krell of the Vraxian Empire stood up. He was angry, his scaled face showing colors that meant rage in his species. The humans are savages. They crashed their ships into ours deliberately. They detonated weapons that killed their own people just to hurt us. This is not civilized warfare. This is insanity, Counselor Miraseth of the Peaceful Luminari spoke up. She was a gentle species, one that had never fought a war in their entire history. But Ambassador Krell, did your empire not attack Earth first? The humans were defending their home. Is that not their right? They were ordered to surrender, Krell shouted. We offered them terms. They refused and chose violence instead. What were these terms? Miraseth asked calmly. Did you offer them equality, freedom, or did you demand their submission? The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. The Vraxian terms had been clear. Submit or die. The humans had chosen a third option. Fight. On Earth, Peter Grant watched the council proceedings through intercepted communications. His intelligence network had agents throughout the galaxy, and they fed him constant updates. Beside him, Nicole and the remaining military leadership studied the political situation. They're divided, Colonel Andrew Wells observed. He was one of the few senior officers who survived the battle, having commanded Earth's defensive satellites. Half the council wants to leave us alone. The other half wants to finish what the Vraxians started. Fear, Peter said simply. They're afraid of us now. They've never encountered a species that fights like we do. Most species in the galaxy evolved on gentle worlds. When they face overwhelming force, they surrender because it makes sense. But we come from Earth, where nothing was ever easy. We learned early that sometimes you have to fight even when the odds are bad. Nicole brought up a star map showing human territory. Sir, the colony ships reached their destinations. All 312 evacuation vessels made it safely. 50 million civilians are now on worlds beyond the reach of the Vraxian fleet. Even if Earth falls, humanity survives. Peter nodded slowly. That had been the real goal of the battle. Buy time for the civilians to escape. Everything else was secondary. But now humanity had something more valuable than just survival. They had respect earned through blood and sacrifice. What about our secret projects? Peter asked. Nicole glanced around even though they were in a secure room. Project Prometheus is almost complete. The scientists say it's ready for testing. But sir, if we use it, we'll violate every treaty the Council has. They could turn the entire galaxy against us. Let them, Peter said coldly. If they force us to fight again, we'll use every weapon we have. I won't sacrifice more human lives because we're trying to follow rules that our enemies ignore. In space near Jupiter, Captain Susan Mitchell was leading a salvage mission. Her ship, the Defiant, had been repaired enough to fly again. Now she was searching through the debris field from the battle, looking for anything useful. Wreckage from both human and Vraxian ships floated through space, silent monuments to the dead. Captain, we're picking up a signal, her tactical officer reported. It's coming from inside that destroyed Vraxian cruiser. Weak but definitely artificial. Susan studied her sensors. The cruiser had been torn in half by the blast that destroyed the Valiant. Most of it was open to space. Nothing should be alive inside. But the signal was there, weak but steady. Take us closer, Susan ordered. Launch a recovery team. If someone survived in there, we need to find them. 20 minutes later, her Marines returned with an unexpected find. 3 Vraxian soldiers, barely alive. Their suits keeping them from freezing in the vacuum. They were brought aboard the Defiant and taken to medical bay. Susan went down to see them personally. The lead Vraxian's name was Captain Vornith. He was injured badly with broken bones and radiation burns. But he was conscious, and when he saw Susan, he did something surprising. He raised his hand in what looked like a peaceful gesture. Human Captain, Vornith said through a translator device. I request asylum. My crew and I, we do not wish to continue this war. We have seen what you do, what you sacrifice. We have questions about our orders. Susan was shocked. Vraxian defectors. In all the intelligence reports about the Vraxian Empire, there had never been a single mention of soldiers refusing to fight. The Vraxians were known for their discipline, their loyalty, their unwavering dedication to the Empire. Why? Susan asked. Why would you turn against your own people? Vornith was quiet for a moment, struggling to find words. We watched your ships fight. We saw them crash into our vessels when they could have retreated. We saw you detonate your own base rather than let us capture it. In our empire, soldiers are taught that survival is the highest duty. But you humans, you believe some things are worth dying for. This is new to us. This makes us think. Susan contacted Earth immediately. Peter Grant received her report within the hour, and he understood the opportunity immediately. If Vraxian soldiers were defecting, it meant cracks in the enemy's resolve. It meant the battle had done more than just hurt the Vraxian fleet. It had hurt their confidence, their certainty, their belief in their own superiority. Grant them asylum, Peter ordered. Keep them under guard, but treat them well. And Susan, make sure the Council knows about this. Let them know we're offering shelter to anyone who refuses to fight against humanity. The news of Vraxian defectors reached the Council chamber within hours. The political impact was enormous. Ambassador Krell stood up in fury, demanding that the humans return his soldiers. Other species began to question whether the war against Earth was justified. This proves the humans are manipulating our people, Krell shouted. They're using some kind of mind control. Or, Mirazeth said calmly, your soldiers are using their own minds and choosing not to kill innocent people. Perhaps the problem is not with the humans, but with your empire's policies. The argument grew heated. Some species sided with the Vraxians, arguing that the Council needed to present a united front. Others sided with humanity, saying that any species had the right to defend their home. Still others remained neutral, watching and waiting to see which side would win. High Counselor Zephyrim listened to all the arguments, then raised his hand for silence. Enough. We are acting like children arguing over toys. The question before us is simple. Do we escalate this conflict, or do we seek peace? If we send more fleets, more species will die fighting these Deathworlders. But if we negotiate, we acknowledge that a single species can defy the Council and survive. What message does that send to other species who might resist our authority? Mirazeth stood up. Perhaps it sends the right message. that the Council exists to promote peace and cooperation, not to enforce submission. The humans asked only to be left alone. We attacked them. Perhaps we are the ones who were wrong. The debate continued for hours. Finally, a vote was called. The motion was simple: send a diplomatic mission to Earth to attempt negotiation. The alternative was total war, committing the full might of the Council's military forces to crush humanity. The vote passed, but barely. 106 species voted for negotiation. 94 voted for war. It was the closest vote in Council history, and it revealed deep divisions within the galaxy's ruling body. Peter Grant watched the vote results and allowed himself a small smile. Negotiation meant survival. It meant humanity would have a chance to rebuild, to prepare to make sure they were never caught unprepared again. They're sending diplomats, Nicole reported. High Counselor Zephyrim himself will lead the delegation. They'll arrive in 3 weeks. Good, Peter said. That gives us time to prepare. I want every advantage we can get when those diplomats arrive. Show them our strength. Show them our determination. Show them that we will never bow to anyone. He looked at the tactical displays showing Earth's solar system. In orbit around every planet, construction crews were building new defensive stations. In shipyards on Mars and in the asteroid belt, new vessels were taking shape. On Earth itself, millions of people were training for military service, determined to defend their world if war came again. We won the battle, Peter said quietly. Now we have to win the peace, and that might be even harder across the galaxy. The story of humanity's stand was spreading. Other species whispered about the Deathworlders who refused to surrender. Young soldiers in a dozen different armies. 5 years passed since the treaty was signed. Earth had changed in ways that surprised even its own people. The orbital shipyards around Mars now produced vessels that could match any ship in the Council fleet. Human colonies spread across a dozen star systems, each one fortified and ready to defend itself. And most importantly, humanity had earned genuine respect from many of the elder races. Peter Grant stood in his garden in Colorado, watching his grandchildren play. Emma was 12 now, and she wore the uniform of Earth's Junior Space Academy. She wanted to be a ship captain like the heroes of the Battle of Luna. Her brother Jack was 10, and he wanted to be an engineer who built the new defensive stations that protected Earth. Nicole Price visited him that afternoon, bringing news from the capital. She was now Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, a position that kept her traveling between stars constantly. The Council wants to make our membership permanent, Nicole said as they sat on Peter's porch. The 5-year transition period ends next month, and they're prepared to vote us in as full members with all rights. Peter sipped his coffee and smiled. That's good news. What's the catch? There's always a catch with you, Nicole laughed. Actually, there's an interesting proposal. Several younger species want Earth to sponsor a new faction within the Council. They're calling it the Deathworld Alliance. Species from harsh planets who feel the elder races don't understand their concerns. How many species are we talking about? 15 so far, with more interested. They've seen what we accomplished and they want to follow our example. Not fighting necessarily, but standing up for themselves. Demanding equal treatment? Peter thought about that. It made sense. Earth's victory had inspired other species who felt oppressed by the Council's traditional power structure. The question was whether humanity wanted to lead such a movement. We'd be making enemies, Peter said. The elder races won't like us organizing the younger species against them. We'd also be making powerful friends. And isn't that what we fought for? The right for all species to be treated fairly. Before Peter could answer, an alert came through on Nicole's communication device. She read it quickly and her face grew serious. Peter, we have a situation. A distress call from one of the Council's border colonies. They're under attack by pirates and they're requesting military assistance. Peter stood up immediately, his military instincts taking over despite his retirement. Which colony? Who's attacking? The Kaltor mining colony on the edge of Vraxian space. The attackers are using old Vraxian ships. Probably surplus equipment sold to criminal groups. The colony has minimal defenses and they're asking for help from the nearest Council forces. That's us. We have 3 ships patrolling that sector. Peter pulled up a tactical display on his own device. Contact Captain Helen Price. Tell her to respond to the distress call and engage the pirates. This is exactly the kind of situation the Mutual Defense Pact was designed for. Nicole sent the orders immediately. Within an hour, The human ships changed course and headed for the Kalter colony at maximum speed. Captain Helen Price commanded the new destroyer called the Defender, and she was eager to prove that humans were reliable allies, not just fierce enemies. The Kaltor were one of the species that had been conquered by the Vraxians decades ago. They lived as second-class citizens within the Empire, working in mines and factories with little freedom. This colony was one of the few Kaltor settlements outside Vraxian control, and it was a symbol of hope for their people. Helen Price studied the tactical situation as her ship approached. The pirates had 6 vessels, all old but still dangerous. The colony had 2 small defense stations that were barely holding. If the Defender didn't arrive soon, the colony would fall and thousands of Kaltor civilians would be killed or enslaved. "All hands battle stations," Helen ordered. "We're going in fast and hard. Target their command ship first. Show them what happens when you attack a council colony." The Defender dropped out of faster-than-light travel right in the middle of the battle. The pirates were shocked to see a human warship appear. They had heard the stories about the Battle of Luna, but most thought they were exaggerated. They were about to learn the truth. Helen's ship hit the pirate command vessel with a full spread of missiles before the enemy could react. The pirate ship exploded in a brilliant flash. The other 5 pirate vessels tried to scatter, but the 2 other human ships arrived moments later. The battle was over in 15 minutes. 4 pirate ships were destroyed. 2 tried to surrender, but they had killed civilians during their attack. Human ships didn't accept surrender from people who murdered innocents. The Kalter colony sent a message of gratitude that brought tears to Helen's eyes. "Thank you, human friends. You saved us. You honored the treaty. Many species make promises, but you humans keep yours." The news of the battle spread quickly. Earth had responded to a distress call and saved a council colony without hesitation. Other species began to see humans not as dangerous savages, but as reliable protectors. More importantly, the species who felt weak and vulnerable saw that someone was willing to defend them. Within weeks, 20 more species requested to join the proposed Deathworld alliance. They wanted Earth's protection and friendship. They wanted to learn how to stand up for themselves the way humans had. Peter watched these developments with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was proud that humanity was using its strength to help others rather than conquer them. On the other hand, he worried that Earth was taking on too many commitments too quickly. "We can't protect everyone," Peter told Nicole during one of their conversations. "We're still rebuilding from the war. We have maybe 30 ships that can fight effectively. That's not enough to police the entire galaxy." "We don't have to police the galaxy," Nicole replied. "We just have to be willing to help when it matters. And we have to teach other species how to defend themselves. That's what the Deathworld Alliance is really about. Not Earth protecting everyone, but everyone learning to protect themselves." The idea took hold. Earth began sharing military training and defensive technology with its allies. Human instructors traveled to other worlds, teaching soldiers how to fight more effectively. Human engineers helped build better defensive stations around vulnerable colonies. And human diplomats worked within the council to change laws that favored the elder races over younger species. Not everyone was happy with these changes. The Vraxian Empire watched Earth's growing influence with suspicion. Ambassador Krell continued to argue that humans were dangerous and should be contained. But his voice grew weaker as more species joined the Deathworld Alliance. Then came the moment that tested everything humanity had built. A council member species called the Selthar was attacked by unknown forces. Their homeworld was bombarded from orbit. Millions died. The attackers left no identification, but evidence suggested they were using modified Vraxian weapons. The council demanded an investigation, but the Vraxians refused to cooperate. They claimed they were being framed. Ambassador Krell argued that the attack was designed to make his empire look guilty. The council chamber erupted in arguments and accusations. Peter, watching from Earth, saw an opportunity and a danger. If the Vraxians were really behind the attack, they needed to be held accountable. But if they were innocent and being framed, supporting false accusations would make humanity look like hypocrites who talked about justice, but practiced revenge. "We need to know the truth," Peter told Nicole. "Send Captain Susan Mitchell. Her ship has the best sensors in the fleet. Have her investigate the attack site independently. Whatever she finds, we'll present it to the council honestly." Susan Mitchell took the Defiant to the Selthar homeworld. What she found there surprised everyone. The attackers had indeed used Fraxian weapons, but they weren't Fraxian military. They were pirates and criminals who had stolen old military equipment when the Vraxian fleet retreated after the Battle of Luna. In the chaos following that defeat, weapons and ships had gone missing, sold to the highest bidder. Susan brought her evidence to the council and she presented it fairly. The Vraxians are not directly responsible for this attack. However, they are responsible for losing control of their military equipment. If they had properly secured their weapons after their defeat at Earth, these criminals would never have obtained them. It was a balanced judgment that satisfied no one completely, but felt fair to most. The Vraxians were ordered to track down all their missing military equipment and face sanctions for their carelessness. The criminals who actually committed the attack were hunted down by a joint fleet that included human ships, alongside vessels from 6 other species. The incident showed that humanity could be trusted to investigate fairly, even when it involved their former enemies. It showed that Earth valued truth over revenge, and it showed that the Deathworld Alliance was about justice, not just power. The final vote on Earth's permanent council membership came 1 month later. Peter traveled to the council chamber to witness it personally. He stood in the observation gallery with Nicole, watching as representatives from 200 species cast their votes. When the results came in, Peter felt a weight lift from his shoulders. 163 species voted in favor. Only 37 voted against. Earth was now a full 1 year had passed since the Harmony's Light incident. The galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Piracy rates had dropped by 60% across all major trade routes. Species that had never cooperated before were now working together on joint security initiatives. The Galactic Council had established new protocols for responding to distress calls, and at the center of it all was humanity. Rachel Turner stood on the bridge of the TDF Resolute, her hands steady on the tactical console. She had been assigned to the ship 8 months ago, fresh out of the academy. Since then, she had responded to 12 distress calls, helped evacuate a colony threatened by a solar flare, and assisted in the capture of 3 different pirate groups. Contacts on long-range sensors, announced Ensign Kyle Rogers from the sensor station. Looks like a merchant convoy. They're broadcasting standard identification codes. Everything appears normal. Captain Linda Shaw sat in the command chair, reviewing reports on her datapad. She was a veteran officer with 20 years of experience. She had commanded the Resolute for 3 years and had built it into one of the most efficient ships in the fleet. Keep monitoring them, Shaw ordered. We're the only military vessel in this sector. If anything happens, we're their only backup. Rachel studied her displays carefully. The convoy consisted of 5 large cargo ships and 2 smaller escort vessels. They were traveling from the Deltari system to the Velkari homeworld, carrying industrial equipment and luxury goods. The route was considered safe, but Rachel had learned that safe was a relative term in space. 15 minutes later, the alarm system started screaming. Multiple contacts dropping out of faster-than-light travel, Kyle shouted. 6 unknown vessels. They're not broadcasting identification codes. They're moving to intercept the convoy. Captain Shaw was on her feet instantly. Battle stations, get me a weapons lock on those ships. Send a message to the convoy telling them to break formation and run. Rachel's fingers flew across her console. The ship's weapon systems came online. Railguns charged, point defense systems activated, missile tubes loaded. Unknown vessels, this is the TDF Resolute, Captain Shaw transmitted. You are approaching a civilian convoy in a threatening manner. Identify yourselves immediately, or we will consider you hostile. The response came quickly. Terran ship, this is not your concern. These vessels carry cargo that belongs to us. Do not interfere. Shaw looked at her tactical display. 6 ships against 1. They were trying to intimidate her. They had made a mistake. All ships in this sector are our concern, Shaw replied. You have 30 seconds to alter course and withdraw. After that, we will take action. Rachel watched as the unknown ships continued toward the convoy. They weren't backing down. She felt her heart rate increase, adrenaline flooding her system. This was different from training exercises. This was real. 20 seconds, Shaw said calmly. Weapons, prepare to fire. Target locks acquired. Rachel reported. All 6 vessels are in range. 10 seconds. The unknown ships opened fire on the convoy. Energy beams lanced through space, hitting the shields of the merchant vessels. The shields held, but they wouldn't last long against sustained fire. That's it, Shaw said. Fire. Rachel pressed the firing controls. The Resolute's railguns fired in sequence, 3 rounds per second. The solid metal projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds, crossing the distance to the target in moments. The first unknown ship's shields flared and failed. The projectile punched through the hull, causing massive internal damage. The ship went dark, its engines offline. The other 5 ships scattered, breaking off their attack on the convoy. But the Resolute was faster. Shaw maneuvered the ship with practiced skill, keeping the enemy vessels in firing range. Target 2 and 3, Shaw ordered. Disable their engines. Rachel fired again. 2 more ships were hit, their propulsion systems destroyed. They tumbled through space, helpless. The remaining 3 ships tried to run. They activated their faster-than-light drives, trying to escape. Not today, Shaw said. Missiles away. The Resolute launched 6 missiles. They were smart weapons capable of tracking targets through faster-than-light travel for short distances. 3 of the missiles found their marks. The fleeing ships dropped back into normal space, their drives damaged. The entire engagement had lasted 4 minutes. Cease fire, Shaw ordered. Send boarding teams to secure those vessels, and somebody get me identification on who these people are. Over the next hour, the crew of the Resolute learned they had just stopped a raid by the Fentari Syndicate, a criminal organization that operated across 3 sectors. The 6 ships had been attempting to steal a shipment of valuable computer components worth millions of credits. Captain Shaw stood in her ready room, talking to Admiral Coleman via holographic communication. Good work, Captain, Coleman said. You followed protocol perfectly. The convoy is safe and we've captured 6 more criminals. Thank you, Admiral, Shaw replied. But I have to say, this is the 4th raid attempt we've stopped this month. The criminals are getting bolder. They're testing us, Coleman said. They want to see if we'll respond every time. They want to find out if we're really committed to protecting civilian shipping. And are we? Shaw asked. Admiral, we only have 60 ships in the entire sector. There are thousands of trade routes, we can't be everywhere. Coleman smiled grimly. We don't need to be everywhere, Captain. We just need to respond fast enough and hit hard enough that the criminals realize it's not worth the risk. Every raid we stop, every pirate group we capture sends a message. Attack civilian ships in human-protected space and you will pay the price. After the communication ended, Shaw walked to her viewing port. She could see the disabled Fentari ships being towed by Resolute's support craft. Soon they would be in custody, their crews facing trial for attempted piracy. A year ago, those ships might have succeeded. A year ago, that convoy might have been robbed or destroyed. But things had changed. Humanity had changed them. On the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Susan Drake attended a meeting of the Security Committee. Representatives from 30 different species sat around the large conference table, discussing proposals for improving galactic security. The human model has been remarkably effective, said Ambassador Thel Nara, who now represented the Velkari on the committee. Since Earth began patrolling trade routes, piracy in protected sectors has dropped dramatically. We propose expanding this system to other regions. The question is who will provide the ships, said another representative, a tall being from the Cortani species. Not every civilization has the military capacity that humans possess. Then perhaps we should learn from them, suggested a representative from the Dravix Collective. The humans have offered to share their tactical doctrines and training methods. Several species have already begun implementing their systems. Susan listened carefully. It was strange to hear other species discussing humanity like they were some kind of security experts. A year ago, most of these representatives had barely known Earth existed. Now they were modeling their militaries after human designs. Ambassador Drake, the committee chairman said, your government has been at the forefront of this effort. What are your thoughts on expansion? Susan stood to address the committee. We're willing to help, but we need to be realistic. Earth can provide training, technology, and tactical support. But we can't patrol the entire galaxy. Each species needs to take responsibility for their own security. She paused. What we can do is create a rapid response network. Human ships, along with vessels from allied species, positioned strategically throughout the galaxy. When a distress call comes in, the nearest ship responds immediately. No delays, no bureaucracy, just direct action. Some species may view this as human militarism, one representative said cautiously. They may fear that Earth is trying to dominate the galaxy through military force. Susan smiled slightly. We're not trying to dominate anyone. We're trying to make sure that when someone calls for help, that help actually arrives. The old system didn't work. Distress calls went to the council. The council debated. Committees formed. Reports were written. And while everyone talked, people died. She looked around the room. We're offering a better way. Not a human way or a Velkari way or any single species way. Just a better way. One that prioritizes saving lives over following procedure. The committee voted on the proposal 3 hours later. It passed with near unanimity. The Rapid Response Initiative would begin operating within 6 months. Back on Earth, in the city of Geneva, a ceremony was taking place. The Terran Defense Academy was graduating its largest class ever. 500 new officers stood in formation, their dress uniforms crisp and clean. Among them was Rachel's younger brother, Danny Turner, who had followed his sister into military service. Admiral Coleman gave the commencement address. She stood at the podium looking out at the young faces before her. 1 year ago, Captain Henry Blake responded to a distress call, she began. He didn't know the species calling for help. He didn't know if there would be political consequences. He just knew that people were in danger and he could help them. That decision changed the galaxy, Coleman continued. It showed other species that humanity is serious about our values, that we mean what we say when we talk about protecting the innocent.